Okay, we are live. All right, thank you everyone for joining us. Welcome, my name is Elise Schrock. I am the president of the Indiana Latino Democratic Caucus. My pronouns are she, her, ella, and we are excited to have everyone here today to kick off our INLDC virtual policy series. This is a policy series that was created from a mind meld from our incredible executive committee volunteers and leaders from the Latino Caucus. We identified a number of issues that are of incredible importance to the community. And these conversations are not simply meant to just be a one-off educational experience. These are meant to be a starting point if you're just joining us in this work, or a bridge to really enhance the way you advocate for our community. This is meant to empower you, to give you research, organizing tools, and real-time ways that we can advocate for policies that are important to our community. So I don't want to spend too much time other than to just say thank you so much for being here. It's incredibly important that you're here and part of this conversation and part of the organizing we're here to do. The Latino Caucus, Indiana Democratic Latino Caucus, is an organization that really works to empower and organize Latinos and Hispanic Hoosiers to run for office, to be a part of the electoral process if they're not able to run for office, and to advocate for not only policies that will move us forward, but advocate for ourselves within the structure of the Democratic Party. So that's a little bit about what we do. From here, I want to kind of talk about how, oh, hey, Rep Andrade, about how this evening will go. First, we're going to see a presentation from Patrick Imony, who has put together some incredible research on what driver's card legislation could do for our state. That will be about a 15-minute presentation. From there, we will go into our panel discussion that we have an incredible panel we've pulled together for you this evening, moderated by our own Congressional District 4 Latino Caucus Chair, Monica Casanova, an incredible leader in our community. Around 6:50, we'll be taking questions from anyone who may be watching here in our webinar, or also we're streaming live on Facebook. And then shortly after 7:15, we will be doing some in real time action on what we've heard and what we've learned today. And I'll be walking you all through on where to find your legislator, how to reach out to them, and we'll walk you through any questions you may have on how to make sure that you are contacting your legislators and taking action on the items we discussed today. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Patrick Imony. If you could just give us a little bit of information about yourself, and we'll move on to the presentation. Thank you everyone for being here.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Elise, for inviting our organization here, and all attendees for being here to learn about advocating for a really essential policy that is driving card legislation proposed in the upcoming session. I'm here as a representative of the Indiana Driving Privilege Card Project. We're a group of students at the University of Notre Dame that have been working on concurrent research and advocacy in favor of driving card legislation. So we have a brief presentation to share with you regarding our research on some of the quantitative benefits to Indiana communities of driving card legislation. I apologize, but I'm having some technical difficulties with the screen sharing, if that can be enabled.
Patrick, I'm trying to...
Yeah, no worries. Just a moment, you all. I apologize.
Patrick, are you comfortable with me making you host so that you can do that screen sharing?
Yes, that works.
Okay, and then you can send that back to me.
Is the presentation visible to everyone?
Yes.
Wonderful. As I mentioned, I represent the Indiana Driving Privilege Card Project. We're a team of students at the University of Notre Dame that was recruited to research and advocate for driving card legislation in the 2021 legislative session by Jesus Rivera, an organizer in the Northwest Indiana region affiliated with Proteus, the St. Albert's Catholic Church Social Justice Roundtable, and a few other organizations. I'm here to present the findings of our research report, which quantifies the projected effects of driving card legislation in Indiana. Our research and advocacy has focused on analyzing the quantitative benefits of this legislation for the whole state, recognizing that the primary focus of this legislation and its most important benefit is to give all Indiana residents an opportunity to be able to drive legally and participate fully in their communities, but that providing that benefit also provides benefits to all community members in Indiana. And so that's where our research focus has prioritized, because it's understudied, especially for the specifics of Indiana. So our white paper includes several components. It includes analysis of the key provisions of the legislation and some legal analysis, estimates for the number of applicants under the driving card program, and then quantitatively and qualitatively analyzes 5 key benefits of the legislation. Those are traffic safety, insurance premiums and revenue, economic growth, state revenue, and law enforcement, and deals briefly with the prospects for implementation. To begin, we look at driving privilege laws in other states to contextualize the effort that's happening here in Indiana. And we see that 17 jurisdictions, including the District of Columbia, have passed this legislation starting as early as 1993, but with an average passage date of about 8 years ago. Now, compared to the proposed Indiana legislation, most of them have a slightly shorter residency requirement and a slightly longer renewal period. 8 of the 13 laws are considered moderate or strict in terms of documentation requirements. Indiana's legislation would be classified as moderate under the typology that other papers have used. And critically, 9 of these 17 jurisdictions passed their legislation in a bipartisan manner, which we like to use to emphasize that this legislation is not just an issue for one party or another, but is something that we believe everyone can get behind. We also follow Gonzalez et al., another white paper, which has looked at the effects of driving privilege laws on the rate of change of the undocumented population in other states. It finds that the effect on the number of undocumented immigrants in a state is modest, if at all. And actually, a case study of Utah, my apologies. A case study of Utah found that the rate of change of their undocumented population stayed the same irrespective of this legislation. So this is helpful statistical evidence to push back on the misguided notion that driving privilege legislation may make a particular state a magnet for undocumented residents, since the rate of growth in Indiana of the undocumented population is not expected to change after driving privilege laws are passed. To begin, by summarizing our research on the number of people who apply for driver's license, we project a stable application rate of 48.1%. That is, after this program is up and running, in any given year, 48.1% of eligible undocumented residents will hold driving cards. We take this primarily from Utah, a very comparable state after which this legislation is modeled, but most application rate estimates from various studies converge around 50%. We also estimate the distribution over the first 3 years, which is critical to some of our other projections, using California monthly data, and find that year 1 would account for about 60% of the progress towards that stable application rate. The model also captures modest adjustments for population growth, interstate mobility rates, and age, but it does not capture macro effects. So if economic conditions or others would change the number of undocumented residents in the state, that may make the number of applicants more or less. And from this, we find that over the first 3 years, the state would issue over 43,000 driving cards to discrete applicants. More, of course, if you factor in the renewals every year. That number would increase modestly to 50,000 discrete individuals receiving driving cards over the first 10 years of this legislation. To begin by talking about the benefits that we analyze, we start by looking at traffic safety. Now, the pathway for this, that other states have seen, is not that driving card holders are for some reason better or worse drivers, but more that people who don't currently have legal authorization to drive don't have access to training and certification processes that are offered by the state, and also may have greater consequences for interaction with law enforcement, even if there's traffic incidents at which they're not at fault, which can increase the rate of hit and runs. So we use two methods to, our white paper used two methods to study this: paired comparisons of states with and without driving privilege laws with similar rates of urbanization, looking at both of these outcomes between 2012 and 2016. And then a more predictive method where we calculate the average outperformance rates of all states with driving privilege laws, looking at the 2 years before and after the passage of the law. We find the effect on traffic fatalities under method 2 is modest, but on hit and runs is drastic, with states seeing an average outperformance rate of 14%. Even under conservative estimates, we project that Indiana will outperform the national trend in hit and run fatality rates by 5%, decreasing the number of fatal hit and runs in the state by about 3.6%. That would be enough to bring Indiana below the national average for fatal hit and runs. Our paired comparison also illustrates that most states with driving privilege laws fall below the national average for both traffic fatalities and for hit and runs. And in those paired comparisons, states with driving privilege laws do almost exclusively better. The second benefit our team has analyzed is insurance premiums and revenue. The story here is pretty simple. Uninsured drivers currently cause $4.1 billion nationally in losses for the insurance industry. But a lot of that for undocumented drivers is because without a driver's license, they have no pathway to obtain insurance. So granting legal certification to more individuals would increase the insured rate in the state, which would both decrease insurance costs because fewer people are having to pay in to cover the cost of uninsured drivers on the road, and also increase insurance revenue because the base of insured drivers is broader. The consequences of this are, for insurance companies, a $68 million increase in their revenue cumulatively over 3 years of the program, and critically, an estimated $25 reduction in the average annual auto insurance premium in Indiana. This follows a national study and adjusts for Indiana's inputs, including the undocumented population and the driving age population. The third paper the third issue our white paper looks at is that of economic growth. Now, there are a basket of economic effects for this legislation, not all of which can be easily quantified, but the scale of the impact would be significant. The Center for Migration Studies estimates that the Indiana undocumented working population is 73,000 people, meaning that this would help a lot of people move around, get to work, and participate in their local economies. Applying a study from California that found a modest increase in the propensity to work for undocumented women. Applying these coefficients, we estimate that over 1,400 women would be added to the Indiana labor force, which, using several different estimates for saving rates, could result in an increase of between $17 million and $23.5 million in increased consumption just from this labor effect alone. Also, applying methodology used by the Fiscal Policy Institute in New York to estimate how auto sales would increase as a consequence of more people being able to drive and therefore cars, being more valuable, estimates that auto sales could increase by up to $141 million over 3 years, which not only has beneficial effects on the economy, but would be very good news for state revenue, the fourth impact that we look at. State revenue is a key consideration for many lawmakers, and we found success sharing our estimates with regard to state revenue because we look at 3 different revenue streams. Direct revenue, where a lot of analysis stops, which is just payments made from DPC applicants to the state as a consequence of receiving the driving card, as well as associated consumption revenue, which is additional tax revenue from the gas tax and from sales tax, since more people are buying cars, driving more often, and repairing those cars more often. Growing the pie by growing the economy would also increase state tax revenue, although this is much harder to quantify. So we look at just those first 2 revenue streams, and 10 different revenue sources specifically, from registration fees, excise taxes, and license fees on the new DPs, the new driving card and the renewals. And then in addition, a gas tax, sales tax on car purchases, and sales tax on car repairs. And adding these all together over 3 years, we find that this could offer up to $17 million in increased contribution to state revenues in just the first 3 years after implementation. This is more than enough to pay for the cost of implementing this program, which all estimates place it under $1 million, and would be a huge boon to the state revenue in a year where the state budget is hurting due to COVID-19. So this argument in particular has had a lot of traction with lawmakers, and we encourage you to share it with whoever you're reaching out to. Now, the last benefit we look at is the benefit to state law enforcement. There are several benefits that this legislation offers state law enforcement. It would save them time and money, since state law enforcement is no longer spending time taking safe drivers off the road purely for driving without a license. It would improve police-community relations, since drivers are identifiable to law enforcement and have less to fear from interactions with them on the road. And critically, it would improve state police investigations, since they have access to the BMV database to enforce state law. What it wouldn't do, though, is increase the efficacy of federal immigration enforcement. And we think that's a really important part of this law, is that it has strong non-disclosure provisions. Senate Bill 319 currently includes protections that prevent the disclosure of sensitive personal information, including names, addresses, birth dates, and photographs. That's the same the full protection that's currently afforded to driver's licenses. And most importantly, it prevents the disclosure of the following without an explicit judicial warrant: whether an individual holds a driver's license or driving card, and whether an individual applied with an ITIN or an SSN. What this does is it prevents anyone from seeing whether or not a given person holds a driver's license or a driving card, and then making inferences about somebody's immigration status. And we think this stacks up favorably even against the non-disclosure provisions in New York, California, and other states where this is a real priority of the legislation, because it prevents anyone, not just federal law or federal immigration enforcement, but anyone, from seeing whether a particular individual holds a driver card or a driver's license. Finally, we'd like to share some of the endorsements that this legislation has focused on. As I mentioned, our outreach strategy has focused on some non-traditional sources of support for this legislation, including police, law enforcement and sheriffs, the chambers of commerce, the insurance industry, and other people focused on business and economy issues. We're also very, very grateful for the work of partners such as the IUIA and some other folks who have focused on making sure this legislation has support from across the spectrum, especially in organizations advocating for immigrant rights. But we'd like to share a couple of these key endorsements, including the Indiana Chamber of Commerce has expressed favorable disposition towards this legislation and has committed to testify in favor of it. The Indiana Driver Education Association has formally endorsed the legislation, as has the Indiana Association of the Chiefs of Police. And just today, the Insurance Institute of Indiana also voted to endorse this legislation. So this is a good group of stakeholders that are endorsing this legislation. In addition, we have individual endorsements from folks like Immigration Attorney Rudy Monterosa in the South Bend area, and some of our law enforcement in South Bend and St. Joseph County, including Sheriff Bill Redmond and Chief Scott Rakowski of the SBPD. We also have wonderful lawmakers championing this legislation, including Representative Campbell, who has joined us today, who we're very thankful for pushing this forward in the House. We have bipartisan sponsorship in the Senate, which is really important, we think, with Senator Niskotsky and Senator Bohacek. And we also have Senator Liz Brown, who's in caucus leadership of the Republicans on the Senate side, who's endorsed this legislation as well. So we think that presenting the benefits of this legislation to all Hoosiers and the full Indiana state economy and security can help bring a lot of people on board with this legislation. And our group has put together some resources. Our white paper is under revision to make sure it comports with the provisions of SB 319 and HB 1138. But we also have a white paper, or we have an infographic and an information packet that are accessible to anyone who's looking to advocate for this in their communities or to their representatives. Thank you very much, and we appreciate the opportunity to share our findings with you today.
Thank you, Patrick. We appreciate that. And if you're able to send a link in the chat to any of the resources you talked to about how to download the white paper and the infographic, that would be awesome. We did have a question from Alan Kaufman on getting some more information so that he could share that. So feel free to send that. If you could make me a host as well.
Absolutely. And we'd be happy to provide that information. I can follow up with you directly, but also make sure that we have links to those materials ready to go at the end of this webinar.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And we will get to full Q&A a little bit later. I want to keep us on track. So keep putting your questions in the Q&A. We'll definitely get to those towards the end, and Patrick is going to stay with us. I do want to get to our panel that is moderated by our CD4 Latino Caucus Chair, Monica Casanova, to really talk further about the way that this is so important to our families and to Hoosiers across the state. Monica, take it away.
Hi, I'm Monica Casanova, and I want to I will let the panelists introduce themselves. So I will lead off with Dara Marquez. Dara has joined us, and she is a Cosecha member. And am I right, Dara, you are president of the state chapter?
No. For Movimiento Cosecha, I'm a volunteer organizer. There's different field organizers here in Indiana, and I'm one of them. Mm-hmm.
Great. So besides that, let's see, Chris Campbell, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Representative Chris Campbell. I represent District 26 in Indiana. That is in the Tippecanoe, West Lafayette area. I was elected in 2018, and groups like IUYA and our Greater Lafayette Immigrant Allies brought this important issue to me and expressed how, driver's cards are their #1 issue. So I appreciate being here today, and I appreciate getting a chance to talk more about this issue. Thanks.
Great, thank you. And Rep. Andrade, if you would introduce yourself, please.
Muy buenas tardes a todos que están aquí en esta tarde. Muchas gracias por su oportunidad. Thank you, everyone. Greetings to everyone this evening. It's an honor to be with everyone tonight, and Patrick doesn't have me on that display there because I am a new representative. I just got elected this past November, and we are working hard, and I have spoken to Representative Chris Campbell about being a co-author on her bill 1138. Yesterday I got to see Senator Migaski on a veterans town hall meeting, and I also expressed my desire to be a co-author in his bill. I put a different bill, which is Bill 1318, and could probably talk about that more later, but I represent House District 12, South Hammond, Munster, Town of Highland, and the northern part of Griffith. And for you guys and beautiful people that are here tonight who know Mara Candelera Riordan, that is the seat that I replace. And so I'm excited that we continue to have Latina representation in that seat. And Mara did such a phenomenal job, and I'm just looking to build upon that. I am a board member at large, proud of it, with the Indiana Latino Democratic Caucus, which are phenomenal chair, Elise Schrock. And I am also a member of the National Hispanic Caucus of State Legislators, and also of NALEO, the National Association of Latino Elected Officials. So I am here to serve all of our Hoosiers, but especially our Latinos, as somebody who comes from Latino descent, Mexicano, and proud of it. And so I'm very honored to be with you all today and be of any service that I could possibly be in the legislation. Gracias.
Great, thank you. And Ashley, if you would introduce yourself, please.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ashley Lopez. I'm with the Indiana Senate Democrats, and I am a legislative assistant as well as the Director of Latino Affairs. Thank you all for having me tonight, and thank you for the groups that have been doing such incredible work on this legislation. Thanks.
So I'm going to start with a question for Dara. Dara, what are the ways your organization is advocating for this legislation?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to share, I didn't get a chance to share a little bit more about Movimiento Cosecha. But yeah, as I mentioned, I'm a field organizer with Movimiento Cosecha, and I'm also a volunteer with the Indiana Undocumented Youth Alliance, which has already been mentioned here. Both groups being led by undocumented leaders, undocumented children and their parents, and vice versa. And so particularly with Movimiento Cosecha, we have a group of leadership here that extends from the national movement, and we're Cosecha Indiana. Our sister groups and movement leaders are in Michigan, in New Jersey, in Georgia, also in Massachusetts, and various other parts around the Southwest. And our particular focus is around permanent protection, dignity, and respect, and especially focused on being able to activate and organize a base of folks that are being directly impacted by the lack of local and national policies around immigration, and not just immigration in general, right? Just immigration rights, et cetera, but particularly focused around permanent protection. So when we speak about permanent protection amongst our leadership, we're talking about not only citizenship, right? Because citizenship within itself has its own definition, right, in this country. But we're also talking about ways that we can be protected locally. There's small initiatives that have been going on, for example, in the city of Elkhart, where I'm from and where I grew up. I was born in Mexico, but I grew up in Elkhart after my parents immigrated there for work purposes. And so a small action was organizing around licenses, right? Around city IDs. So city IDs don't particularly legally protect those who are undocumented or the community within itself, but it's certainly a step forward being able to have a conversation around what protection and what safety and what being rooted in your community can look like and feel like. And so way right now that we are mobilizing our community, specifically our undocumented working community in the state of Indiana, is at first really just sharing the information. When we were growing up as undocumented people organizing with Indiana Undocumented Youth Alliance, our meetings with legislators, right? We were 15, 16 years old. Our meetings a lot of the times ended with legislators actually wondering, like, what the heck did you just talk about, right? Like, what is DACA? What is DAPA? What is a DREAM Act? So a lot of us learned pretty early and pretty quickly that legislators who are meant to be our representatives in the state of Indiana didn't have a clue about first what it meant to have some of these simple protections, right? They're not actual permanent protection, but they're something that have benefited the community in some way or another. So we learned quickly that legislators were not there. They had not been doing their homework, right? And also secondly, on our end, that we couldn't just stay back and stay quiet about these topics, right? Especially after 2011, when many anti-immigrant legislation was happening here in Indiana. Yeah, step by step, the main thing is being able to educate, not just legislators, because that's not our focus at this moment, right? Our focus now is our community, because spaces like these, like we are in right now, are not necessarily being intentionally provided to our community, to those that are being directly impacted. And the main thing is language, right? The first thing. It's not that most don't speak English, because I could tell you that many do, because many have lived here more than 20 plus years, right? But it's more so of like comfort, and also of being able to describe our experiences in a way that truly relates and truly empowers each other. So that's one of the main focuses of Movimiento Cosecha, but it's also building that staircase towards permanent protection, not necessarily because we're pleading, right? We're pleading for legislation that's going to protect our communities, but for Cosecha and how we've learned throughout the years is that we're demanding that permanent protection, that dignity and that respect that is that all of our community has worked for, right, and has sacrificed much for. So that's how we're organizing at the moment around the topic of legislation, but also collaborating with learning from the Notre Dame students, and also being able to stay in communication with some of the authors that have presented this bill this year and previous years.
Hey, thanks, Dada. That was great. That was awesome. And I'm thankful for everything that you've been doing with Cosecha. I'm going to throw this question to our legislators who are present. So what is the process now that the bill has been filed? What happens now?
Well, the process now is to try to get the chair of the committee that these bills have been filed, have been sent to give that bill a hearing. So there is a bill in the Senate and there's a bill in the House. In each of those, they've been assigned to a committee. For the House bill, it's been assigned to the Roads and Transportation Committee, and a similar type of committee for the Senate bill. So in those cases, the chair of that committee has all the power. They can decide whether or not they're going to hear that bill or whether they're not going to hear that bill. So we have to convince first that chair to hear the bill. We also, they're less often going to hear that bill if they don't think that they have support among the members of that committee. So that's another, usually about 10 people within that committee that you need to know that they're going to support the bill. If the chair doesn't feel like they're going to support the bill, he's less likely to hear that bill. So that is our first biggest challenge. But if we can get that happening, that bill has way, it's very likely that we're going to at least get it through one house. If you can get it not only heard, but voted on and passed in that committee. And then it has to go to the other house and go through the same process. The leadership will assign that bill to a committee on that House floor, the Senate or House floor. And again, it goes through committee, the chair needs to hear it, and that process starts all over again.
And just to reemphasize what Representative Campbell said, it's an art. It truly is connecting the dots. And the chair for road and transportation is Representative Pretzel. And then you got to look at who on the R's are in that committee. And then saying, okay, there's 2, 4, 6, 7, 8 of them. How many of those can we get to swaying on our side? How many of those can we get on our side to give us at least an opportunity, and then convince the chair? So it's truly is an art. It's a lot of communication. It's a lot of networking. It's a lot of relationship building. And like Representative Chris Campbell said, and then this year in particular is more difficult because of the pandemic and the restrictions that rightfully so are in place. And so we're not able to normally, like in previous sessions, as I've been told, you could able to do a lot more networking and connecting with this different representatives. Even on my end, getting my LA to schedule some meetings is difficult. We get to see them, but it's everybody's pretty much kind of boxed in, and so it's a process. And then once we get the chair to hear that bill, it goes through the hearing process, and they don't have to vote on it. It doesn't have to get voted to get another reading, or he could look at it and just say, hey, we're not even going to pay attention to this bill. It's a process. It gets voted in the committee. From the committee, it goes to the House, and then the House has to vote on it. And like Representative Campbell says, then it got to go through the same process in the Senate, and the Senate has to do the same amount of work. it's a process, it's an art, and getting these arts to work with us, it's very important. And getting advocacy groups like what we have here tonight to continue to voice their opinion and reaching out to these legislators, because it's not just about Representative Campbell and myself, who you guys know we're here to support you, but it's you guys also being able to email the chair of Road and Transportation and just blow up her LA, his LA, whoever it is, with emails to say, we want this heard in your committee. So it's a process, but we're not here to give up. We're here to keep pushing and be able to here in the near future get the success. And this year's really good. When I spoke to Senator Nagiski yesterday, he thinks he's going to have an opportunity to get his bill heard on his committee. So he was kind of excited. He's going to keep us updated. I'm sure he communicates a lot with Representative Campbell, and I try as much as I can to communicate with Representative Campbell as well when I see her. So if we could get a hearing in the Senate, it will be amazing. So help us reach out to the legislators, reach out to the Senate, and help us out.
Great, thank you. Ashley, I don't want to exclude you either, since you're also there in the middle of it. What's your perspective?
Well, this is my first year with the Senate, and in my position as Director of Latino Affairs. I was very glad to be able to step into this role this past summer. And one of the first things that I did was use a program that we have been hosting since, I believe the founder of it was Elise Schrock herself, the Latino Roundtable. We used that to connect different advocates from all parts of Indiana to each other and to legislators. So Senator Nitskatsky is one of the legislators that frequents the roundtable, and he's the one who sponsored the bill. We were able to use that time in the summer to make sure that the language of the bill was going to protect, the information from the federal government. And now, the beginning of session, we've seen that getting a bill heard has become more difficult because of the COVID restrictions. A couple of the things that we've been hearing from the chairs of committees is that they're trying to limit the amount of bills heard because they're trying to make sure that the committees are concise and follow COVID restrictions. Hopefully though, Senator Nitskatsky is very hopeful that his partnership with Senator Bohacek will allow us to get a hearing. So this is the first time that we've had a co-author on this legislation. It's been introduced so many times in the past, and I think that detail will really, could really make the difference. Getting endorsements from other various advocacy groups or other interest groups is also very, very key. So I think that the group that Ayuya and the Indiana Driving Card Project have been doing really can't be understated how important it is, because what these senators ultimately respond to is their constituents, and they want to know that there is interest in this law. And so I think by creating a holistic view of what the law would provide, the economic and financial side, but also the humanitarian side, and the fact that it will really impact people's lives, I think we kind of have a perfect storm. So I hope that we will get a hearing, and after the hearing will really be when you should be reaching out to your legislators. So once you get the hearing, that kind of gets your foot in the door. Then the legislators that are on that committee will be voting on it. So making sure that the committee for the Senate is the Committee for Homeland Security and Transportation. So knowing their names and contacting their office and letting them know this is legislation that Hoosiers want and that Hoosiers care about. And that also will make the difference.
Can you all talk about the timeline on this?
I pretty much echoing what Representative Campbell said. So we're looking at the end of committee hearings to be that first week of February, if I'm correct. There's a session calendar, and usually that's when we will begin the second process, which will be sending or receiving the bills from the House to the Senate. So by that point is when committees are done. So hopefully we can get a hearing between that time. So right now is when we're really, really paying attention. I know that Patrick and the Indiana Driving Card Project has had a lot of efforts to make sure to talk to Senator Kreider, which is the chair of the Homeland Security and Transportation Committee. But right now, really, we're waiting on him to give us a date when we can expect this bill to be heard. Once that is published, that will be published on the IGA website, and anybody is welcome to that information. Also, if anybody wants to come testify, once the bill is heard, once we have a date when the bill will be heard, people can come testify, and there are, COVID restrictions to that. So the testimony usually took place in the same room as the committee. Now they're in separate rooms, and the sign-up sheet is just right in front of the testimony room. And that will also make a difference if we can get people who have a lot of influence to testify, such as, the Indy Chamber of Commerce or the BMV to come testify in support of this bill. That's huge.
Yeah. Speaking of testimonials, Dada and myself went through the struggle of being undocumented. Dada, can you talk about what is the daily impact of not having this policy in place?
Yeah, so it starts off very, the most immediate need is the vulnerability to being detained and deported, which is the ultimate consequence from being in detention, especially in counties here in Indiana. The lack of policies that protect those that are being detained, or even kind of contracts or agreements that are happening in different counties between the sheriff department and then also the U.S. Marshals or ICE agencies. There really isn't an ICE agency that's contracting, but there are agreements that, they vary from 1 to 2 people being detained at a time in a county jail. So the ultimate consequence and the reason why this form of immediate protection is needed now, this year, right, and as soon as possible, is mainly because of that detention of family separation. When we're talking about that, in regards to advocacy, right, in the sense of urgency, right now we're kind of in a mix of things, and I think Rep. Mike mentioned it, right? There's this work of this art of being able to work inside between those that are of both political parties, and then also those that are assisting all of what the General Assembly is and does, right? But there's also this sense of advocacy, where that sense of advocacy is that urgency. And to be honest, it's been a topic of urgency since 2007, right, when you could no longer either renew or get a new license. So the sense of urgency ever since 2007, I think it would be very impactful also for us to even get a number of how many folks were detained and or deported, how many families were impacted through family unity economically, right, the economic stability, because of their family member was detained for driving without a license. And so I think that's the main immediate need. And then we would go further into conversation, right, around racial profiling. I think there was also a bill and some discussions internally around racial profiling. Really, all the testimonies that we always encounter in all of our community meetings always start, all the stories start with an example of racial profiling, of someone being pulled over because they didn't stop at the stop sign for long enough, right? Maybe 3 seconds shorter than what they're supposed to, right? Or a broken taillight, where they change their lane without putting on their directional. So all these different examples of instances that our community shares is always starts in that way. So being able to have a driver's license or access to really is just ultimately family protection. Being able to, for those that advocate for it, truly stand behind that with something tangible like a license. Mm-hmm.
Ashley, you can talk on this issue from personal experience as well. I forgot to, or I neglected to say that.
Yeah, So I have DACA, and that has been, you know, it allowed me to really understand very young how a piece of legislation can truly impact and change somebody's life and give them opportunities that otherwise wouldn't be available to them. But I do have a very vivid experience of being undocumented, and just that, you know, the ground falls from beneath you when you get a call and you know that your parent has been detained. And I think that, you know, my experience at the state house is that with this particular legislation, if you don't really truly understand the implications, the personal implications of it, it doesn't give you that sense of urgency. Maybe you can't comprehend what it means. But I think that's why also it made me, made one of my first priorities to make sure that we had protective language in the legislation. This language hadn't previously been hadn't been included into the legislation. And I think that, you know, my perspective and my experience from, you know, having lived it, made that the top priority for me. So I think that, you know, as Dara mentioned before, this process of education and like re-education all the time is really important, because if you're not, you know, living an experience, you have to learn it and understand somebody's perspective and understand why we advocate so fiercely and why we do what we do. So that's kind of my position on that.
Thanks, Ashley. That's important. Go ahead, Anna. Sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to resonate with what Ashley mentions, and then also being able to speak of what makes this year very different for us as directly impacted people, whether for ourselves or our families or our loved ones. But we also know that this year, after elections, right, in the Indiana General Assembly, there are very much folks that are unapologetically conservative, right? Or unapologetic about their social views, their policies, and just the way that they see immigrant rights as well. So for us, something that's different, and also coming out after the pandemic of month after month of our community not only being ignored locally, right, in the sense, but also nationally, without being able to have access to financial aid and material aid because of the status, right? There's also the fact that for those that are in the Democratic caucus and those that continue to advocate for legislation like this, continuing to push very unapologetically, perhaps, yes, strategically, as it's always been mentioned and learned, but I think that there's opportunity for the party, for the Democratic Party, and then also the advocates, right, that often stand at rallies with groups that are the grassroots groups, right, that are being directly impacted by policies, to really push this year, continuing to push regardless. And I wanted to appreciate Rep. Mike Andrade to kind of think ahead too, right, of the summer session and how we can continue to have this topic of conversation be the point, the priority for the party, and then the communities as well.
I didn't know if Rep. Andrade, if you had any commentary there.
I do, because I have mentioned to Elise that I have to run to a 7 o'clock meeting, and so my time is brief. And once again, I appreciate the opportunity. Gracias por la oportunidad. I'm going to give everybody a very prime example. 2 weeks ago, I'm a real estate investor, a small business owner, and I went to go look at a property in a very nice upscale area of my community, my district. And it was myself, my personal assistant back home, Eli, who's got a long beard, nopal en la cara, and one of my contractors is also Hispanic. And we went inside the house. We had just bought the house from foreclosure, and we went inside the house. We were 5 minutes inside the house when there was 9 squad cars outside the house, 9 police units. Fortunately, I know the chief of police there and a lot of the officers, and I was like, what's going on in the neighborhood? So my assistant went out and looked, and they're like, they're here for us. I'm like, what? They got the call that we were breaking into this house, right? 3 Mexicanos breaking into this house. And of course, they made a big deal. And it wasn't just 1 squad car, 2 squad car, it was 9. And I have my state rep plate on my truck, and so I came out and I said hi to everyone, and everybody came, oh, hey, Representative Andrade, congratulations. I haven't seen some in a couple months. And everything, it just like, they all left. 2 of them actually stayed, which was very kind of them because they knew me. They know me. 2 of them stayed to make sure we were okay. And then they didn't leave till we actually got done walking the property, checking what the work we needed to do, and we left. But it just reminded me again of our roots. And I think I put something on Twitter the other day, is never forget your roots, never forget where you came from. We all have a story. Todos tenemos una historia. And this is why it's so important more than ever, like Dada said, that we have to advocate, we have to push, and we cannot give up. My parents came as immigrants to this country, and nothing was handed. Everything that they got and everything was, we worked hard for it. And I'm not a DACA recipient. I was born here in this country, but my parents came as immigrants, and I saw the struggles. I saw the racial profiling they had. I remember bailing one of my uncles one time because he got arrested. And it's not just that they take the individual to jail, but they also take possession of the car. Now you have to go pay bond. And a lot of times when you're there, they don't want to cooperate with you, right? So you have to go through the process to bail somebody out. Then the after effect of having, and a lot of these people are on fixed income. This is their money. They don't have anything to spend. This is their rent. This is their utility bills that they have to pay. And now they have to pay $1,000 to get their car out of the pound. And then they have to pay all these fees and hire an attorney. So there's more to it than just, some of the stuff that we see. There's a lot of stuff behind the scenes that hurts these families. And a lot of them are struggling because they're barely living on a fixed income. So we cannot continue to allow people just get pulled over and, of course, have to get arrested and go through the whole process. And they hurt and their families hurt, their kids hurt. And we're going to do our best, Dara, and everybody else here, to continue to advocate. I know Representative Campbell is a big advocate of nosotros, los Latinos and Latinas. And thank you, Representative Campbell. It really brought joy to my heart to see Representative Campbell's bill. And that's why I decided to do mine as an interim study, because I'm like, there's no reason for both of us to put the same bill in play. Let's be creative, let's work together, and let her put the bill. She's been here longer than I have. I'm a freshman coming in, so let me do something different in case this bill doesn't get heard. At least we have something for the summer. Hopefully we get an opportunity. But we're going to continue to advocate. Vamos a seguir adelante y vamos a seguir trabajando duro y siendo esa voz que necesitamos para la gente que no tiene esa voz. We're going to continue to be that voice for the voiceless. And I thank you so much for the opportunity. And we'll be in touch. Samantha Lozano is my LA. Elise, everybody knows, reach out. I'm always trying to be available, phone call, Zoom, in person, whatever it takes, but we got to work together. Y para adelante. No hay que agüitarnos, hay que seguir para adelante. Gracias. Thank you.
Well, gracias, Rep. Andrade, and have a good meeting. Gracias. All right. Just one final question for the rest of the panelists. What are ways, and you've already talked about some of this, but what are ways the community can organize around this? How can we support you? How can the Indiana Latino Democratic Caucus support you, and other organizations that we're a part of?
Well, you guys are doing it. Dara did just a fabulous job last session. It was the first time I had carried the bill. This bill has been carried for, I believe this might be the 8th year that I'm aware of. If it's worth it, if it's so important, we're just going to have to work, and we're going to have to continue to fight. I feel I'm really optimistic this year. It keeps coming back to political party. We are very outnumbered, and it tends to be a Democrat bill, but this year we do have a Republican in the Senate on that bill. So things are looking a little more positive. We feel like we're one step closer to getting a hearing on that bill. Keep calling your legislators, write to them, let them know how important it is. Last year we had over 500, 600 calls to the chair of that committee for the bill that I had, you know, and it takes a lot of work, but that there's definitely an interest. I think throughout the state, we need to continue to make sure that we're connecting with all the legislators throughout the state. So if there are members on this video that are watching us from other parts of the state, reach out to your legislator. I know that I talked about, you know, last year was a census year, and it was so important that everybody be counted, even those undocumented people, because, you know, we're elected based on our population. It doesn't matter where you came from, or, you know, if you're from another country as a student, if you're undocumented, we're representing a population. So we're still representing you, regardless of whether or not you can vote for us. You're part of our community. You're paying taxes, and you may never see the benefits of those taxes if you're paying into Social Security or things like that. So I think, you know, all of us were immigrants, unless you were Native Americans. And even they were immigrants at one point. But, you know, my family came in the early 1900s from Poland. So I think about my 13-year-old great-grandmother coming to a country and, you know, barely speaking English when I was, you know, 10 when she passed away in the 70s. And, you know, she became, you know, part of the United States. And so many of you have grown up here. So, you know, we're a community, and we all need to work together, and we need to work together to make the state better. And I think that, you know, you certainly represent a large population in our communities, and you really give to our communities. So we need to make sure that you're able to participate safely.
I'm gonna jump on to the Q&A unless that you say something.
Yeah, just a quick mention. Thinking we've talked a lot about statewide efforts locally. For those that are listening and are being able to learn from this presentation, if you are a local, like a city in the city council, or you're a mayor, or you know your mayor, there are small steps that you could take within your city. Movimiento Cosecha has developed a resolution types your city can discuss and pass. That way you can bring the topic of conversation within your city. So we have those templates already for any of the communities across the state that want to organize, that want to start locally. And so I invite anyone who would like to do that to reach out to Cosecha Indiana or to myself, and we can share that process, and then also begin some of the community meetings within your city. We always welcome allies, and specifically those that are being directly impacted to lead the story, because my personal opinion is that our undocumented community, including myself, that we're not voiceless, and that, you know, we know very much what is necessary, and what it's going to take for this country and the state to truly have that permanent protection for us. So just wanted to share that option if folks wanted to reach out.
That's awesome. I didn't know that. And this is a good segue into this question. The question is, are municipalities currently empowered to pass laws permitting driver's cards?
Did you want to?
Sure. Since driver's licenses are issued by the BMV, they can't, you know, municipalities can't issue their own, although some municipalities have done other identification card programs like South Bend's municipal ID.
And this question was directed to Patrick. Patrick, does the driving permit lead to increased non-citizen or undocumented population? And I think you addressed this earlier, but
Absolutely, yes. That was studied by a very comprehensive white paper that came out of Rogers Williams University that found that there was no change in the rate of growth or decline of the undocumented population in states before and after DPLs.
Great, thank you. And so far, those are all the questions we've received. We are getting requests for those templates. So that's awesome.
That came in through the
Yeah.
Q&A. One of those is, why is participation of eligible residents less than 50%? Is there a fear on being a list and easily targeted for deportation?
So our research has found that, I mean, some people just don't drive. Even for Indiana eligible citizens, the rate is less than 90% of eligible people who hold driver's licenses normally. There's certainly going to be a variety of factors that might mean people don't apply for driving cards. But fortunately, it pans out better in states that have stronger non-disclosure provisions. So that's why, as Ashley mentioned, it's so important to have those included as statutory.
But I do think there is something to be said about like distrust. These people have been going on years of trying to live as low key and discreetly as possible. So I think that, information is power, right? As long as we advertise the fact that we have put a lot of thought and intention into protecting people, I think that could make the difference as well.
Yeah, I think Representative Andrade did a good job of explaining the economic impact, but I think just the emotional impact and the trauma of being arrested, being jailed and separated from your family is a very scary experience and situation.
And Monica, I'm going to start putting questions as I get them into the chat to you. So there's another one I just put there if you want to start on.
Yeah. So another question for you all. Our community does not arrest and jail drivers without license and insurance unless there's an outstanding warrant, DUI, or resisting false information, etc., false informing. They issue a citation to appear in court, which they overwhelmingly do. Do most police and sheriff departments do likewise, or do they arrest and jail with more frequency?
I don't know if anyone would have data specifically. Me coming from Elkhart and Elkhart County being one of the largest counties in Indiana, and also with the higher amount of arrests, is also, yeah, you can be jailed even without having those things that were listed. From the conversations we have had with local law enforcement, city police officers and their chiefs, they have shared ultimately that the decision is up to the discretion of the officer. So there really are no policies in place statewide or locally, unless intentionally done, that say officers cannot arrest people unless they have such and such criteria, right? So really any officer has a discretion to arrest you and detain you for driving without a license, even after the fact was just because you had a broken taillight. So some of the local initiatives that have been ongoing in various counties have been trying to get the police departments to have policies in place, or even just for the like the city council to address it with the mayor and also the city police officers to essentially just know what the community expectations are. But otherwise, there are no policies. So yes, it is possible. Mm-hmm.
And, just from experience with, I worked at an immigration clinic for about 4 years. That was our experience as well, that it really didn't matter why you were pulled over, but whether it was racial profiling or a broken taillight, typically it would lead to jail.
And Chris, I don't know if we can talk about Tippecanoe County, but in our county, as far as I understand, our local police department has no contracts with ICE or partners with ICE in any way.
They don't, but if they do determine that I know what we've talked about this at Greater Lafayette Immigrant Allies, that we were told by the Sheriff's Department if they do contact ICE or determine that somebody is undocumented, that they are allowed to hold that person for 48 hours for them to come and get them. But after that 48 hours, they will not continue to detain them, but they will release them.
At least I'm not seeing any other questions. I guess a comment here. Representatives need to be educated about the diversity of the community they work for, and we need not only driver's licenses, but safety and our rights respected. So more of a comment, but maybe a way to speak to this comment from Facebook would be helpful.
Yeah, well, another bill that I have is a racial profiling bill. So I think that we certainly have seen a great outcry from our communities this past year in addressing racial profiling. So, and I think that we still have a ways to go. Even our own community seem to be to express that they already have policies in place, yet we've seen instances where racial profiling has occurred. So I think there's, it's definitely a big issue, and it needs to be addressed, not only in our communities, but statewide and countrywide.
And then this is an interesting question. Will the new DACA policy help? So any intersection between DACA and driving card bill?
Well, with DACA, you're able to get a driver's license. So certainly that would help if, with that being reinstated.
Okay, great. And I think those are all our questions. And I will turn it over to Elise. Oh, another comment. Representative Campbell, to your earlier point, all of us were not immigrants. Maybe that should read, we are all immigrants, no?
Unless you're an indigenous person, in which we are on your land, and currently I'm sitting on the land of Casanova.
I think I bet we all, came here at some point, ancestry wise,
Oh, Black slave descendants.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you all so much for this incredibly informative panel. As you can all see that, and so many of you are viewing not only on Zoom, but on Facebook. We're so happy you're here today. But something that I mentioned at the top of this event is that this is not just a one and done educational experience for everyone. This is a call to action, and we need everyone to wrap their support around this issue, to be calling your legislators as this event went on in both the Zoom chat and in the Facebook comments. I was putting in links to the chairs of both the House and the Senate Roads and Transportation Committees. I put information on direct contact to the chairs of those committees. That's who will control if this legislation starts on either side of the chamber down the road towards passage. I put a link in there on how to find your legislator. Something that Representative Campbell spoke to that is really important is yes, we need to be reaching out and prioritizing the committees, but the more people across the state that are aware of this, and the more legislators that hear about this from their constituents, the better. I can tell you from working on the inside when I previously held Ashley's position, and I'm just so thrilled to see the work of the roundtable continuing year after year, and the incredible job you're doing there is so appreciated. It really matters that that representatives hear from the constituents in their area. It's very easy for some to dismiss if you aren't from their district. They can say, well, they're from out of district, they're technically not one of my constituents. It's really important for you to reach out to your legislator. And I'm actually going to try and show you how to do that. And I'm going to ask you all tonight to follow along and to send your legislator a note using the information you have learned tonight, or maybe continuing to learn, and ask for a hearing for these very important bills. Again, House Bill 1138 and Senate Bill 319. So let's get on to how to find your legislator. I'll just do a quick screen share here.
And while you're doing that, Elise, Dada, do you want to plug the meeting that's happening after this?
Oh yeah, please do.
Yes, sorry, I was just texting that I was heading out for that call, but in about 15-20 minutes, we're going to have a Comunicado de Pueblo, or a community press conference. We're gathering all the different community organizers that have organized around this topic. And it's going to be in Spanish, and we're going to be presenting it on Facebook Live. So if you're already on Facebook after this, if you have time, you can hop onto the Cosecha Indiana page. I think Elise shared the link to Facebook on there as well. So we'll be live. We'll be hearing from different community organizers and also from folks that want to share testimony. And then also we're going to be joined by our Cosecha New Jersey leaders who recently won their licenses campaign 2 years ago now. It was in, 2019, a year ago now. So yeah, so for those who would like to hop on after this, there'll be some more information there. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Dada, for all the work you do in this space. Your organizations have been here for years, pushing this issue and holding all of us accountable for making sure that we're doing our part to move this forward for everybody. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right. So everyone should be able to see how to find your legislator. Yes, Monica, not if you can see this, because I can actually see you. Okay, great. So this is on the Indiana General Assembly website. It's iga.in.gov. This is the go-to first source for any type of information you would like to learn about or see along the process of the Indiana legislative session that is currently going on. So you can click up here, you can find bills, you can find legislators, and a lot of information. But for our purposes now, I'm just gonna go ahead and put in the State House address instead of sharing my own personal address across multiple social media platforms. You're going to go to find your legislator, and I've put that link in both the Zoom links. Washington Street, and we're in Indianapolis, Indiana, and it's 46204, I think. So you're going to hit search. Oh, it's entering a address. Okay. There we go. So once you enter your address, you'll see that it's going to pull up your district boundaries here. You can look both Senate, House, and Congress, and then you're going to see your legislators. So these top two, your state senator and your state representative, are who you're going to want to reach out to. So you can go ahead and give them a phone call. I will tell you, this is just a hotline number. I believe, and then if you click on here, it actually takes you to show you all of the bills that they're authoring. Couple of interesting ones here. I would urge people to pay attention to what's going on from this district. And you can send an email. You can visit the caucus page. It usually, will take you to their website, and you'll have all that information. So again, make sure that you are going to find your legislator, put in your address, and this is how you find your information. So I just want to stop here. Are there any questions? Oh, I just saw a question come through. A plug for third house meetings, a good way to raise questions to legislators. Yes. And Ashley, maybe you could help answer this. I know with COVID-19, third house meetings, for those who may not know, are ways that legislators go back in their districts and generally try to hold a local meeting for their constituents to bring any issues to the forefront. Ashley, do you know how they're handling those types of meetings this year?
I'm not certain, but Zoom has been, ruling everything, ruling all our lives. I would assume that it will be hosted via Zoom. We've done several town hall meetings that have been hosted via Zoom. And honestly, I think that Zoom is really great because it's accessible. You can literally take the call from anywhere, and you can, think of questions, research questions as things are going on, right? Being a Zoom participant means that you have the ability to watch, at least right now, show you how to be on, find the IGA website and find your legislator. So really take advantage of it. And I would say follow their social media accounts. They have, a comms team that is dedicated solely to pushing out information about their events and their interests, their bills. So yeah, that would be probably my suggestion.
That's very helpful. Thank you so much.
Representative Campbell may be able to talk about third house and how that's being handled.
Yeah. Representative Campbell, are you still on with us?
Representative.
She may not
Might
be.
have dropped off. Okay.
I'm going to go ahead and stop this share. That way I can see any questions. Are there any other questions on how to access your legislator, or how you can advocate for this legislation as it moves through the legislative session, hopefully, once we get a hearing? Not seeing any other questions pop up. Well, do me a favor. Please use the information we have provided for you. I know we've put a link to Patrick's research in the chat and in the comments. We have given you a number of folks to reach out to, and then please let us know that you have. Once you reach out to your legislators, drop us a line on our Facebook, on Twitter, or on Instagram at INLDC. We would love to follow up with you. We would love to hear how you're advocating for the community. And we would just love to have you participate in all the different ways we are advocating for Hoosier Latinos and the Hispanic community across the state. I will wrap it up with a couple other housekeeping items. This is a policy series. Our next topic we will be talking about is in-state and resident tuition for undocumented Hoosiers. We have a couple legislators who will be joining us to talk about legislation that has long been authored on this, and we're hopeful to see it moving in the right direction along with driving cards. We will also have a policy series the following week on COVID-19 vaccinations, important information that our community needs to hear, and how we can support quick access to healthcare in general, but also the COVID-19 vaccine for the Hoosier Latino community. And then our last one will wrap up with some guests from the Indiana Democratic Labor Caucus. And we'll talk about employment, unemployment, and how important it is for our community to support labor and the intersectional work that is done there. So we have a lot of really great programming coming up. We also have our general caucus meetings and caucus communications that come out. You can visit our website, INLDC.com. And with that, I just want to thank you all. Mil gracias. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to Monica for hosting a great panel discussion, and to all our wonderful panelists for their work in this space.
Okay, gracias. And don't forget to do those calls for action. Contact your legislators and join us for our next series.
So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.